And in answer to your question, how did I feel when I heard the news? Numbed. I felt numbed. I felt numbed in a way that one doesn't normally feel when one learns of the passing of a very elderly person. One may well feel some sadness. You start to reminisce, you think about important events in that person's life or any interactions you might have had with that individual, but you wouldn't necessarily feel numbed. I suppose I feel numbed for the simple reason, which I imagine millions of people around the country will share, that I've never known it otherwise. I'm 59, just coming up to 60. Queen Elizabeth is the monarch whom I have known. There hasn't been a king in my lifetime, and there's been no other monarch. So Queen Elizabeth II, apart from being quite the most extraordinary ambassador for our country, has been for 7 decades part of the warp and weft of our national life, a treasured and, to most people, irreplaceable part of the warp and weft of our national life. So numbed was the feeling, saddened, and stirred really by a recollection of just what an exemplar she has been. And I thought that the House was at its best, and there were people who really rose to the occasion, including the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. I say that as somebody who's been extremely, perhaps even correspondingly critical of Boris Johnson, and I make no apology for that, including very critical of his speech-making capacity or lack of it. But it has to be said that he made what was widely regarded as an outstanding contribution. There were many other fine contributions from members across the House. Does that surprise me? It doesn't surprise me. I think that the House does have a great capacity to come together on occasions of this kind. And in addition to people who speak very well, whom everybody would expect to speak well, there are sometimes unpredictable speeches. There are people who decide to contribute that you don't necessarily think will, or who have an anecdote that they've harbored closely for years and not divulged, and they take the opportunity to share it. So I thought that the House was in very good form. I think back also, of course, to the time of the Diamond Jubilee in 2012, and I recall on that occasion too, the House was in fine fettle and fine voice and fine spirit, because we were acknowledging, heralding and paying tribute to the most outstanding monarch that any of us has known. There have been instances in which a big event has occurred during the time that the House has been sitting. And in those circumstances, the House has to be told. If memory serves me correctly, relatively soon after the passing of my predecessor, Michael Martin, the House was informed of that. And certainly at the time that a very different event and an extremely happy event, the UK's bid for the Olympics was successful, that information came through while the House was sitting. And I recall messages being passed around and a particular minister having the opportunity to inform the House of the success of the bid. But those were very, very different circumstances. In answer to the second part of your question, would it always be the Speaker who would then communicate with the House? In any circumstance that I can envisage, it would be the Speaker who would do so. Theoretically, if the news had come through on a sitting Friday, and for whatever reason, the Speaker was no longer in Westminster at that time, then inevitably it would have fallen to someone else to communicate with the chamber. One of the deputy speakers would have done so. But that is an extremely unlikely scenario. And in any case, it's hypothetical and speculative, because Mr. Speaker has been around at all material times and therefore has been in a position and fully ready to discharge his obligations to the House.